Hello everyone and welcome back to another football nerd video. And just yesterday or the day before, the Denver Broncos themselves hired a head coach. Now, as of right now, whenever I'm recording this, 4 teams have hired head coaches. I will either cover the Broncos hire tomorrow or talk about the Chargers and their move to not San Diego. I'm so used to saying San Diego Chargers. Everyone had that problem with St. Louis Rams, although I'm used to Los Angeles Rams now. Sometimes I make the mistake saying Los Angeles Rams whenever I mean St. Louis Rams. But anyway, I think I'm going to cover the Chargers move to Los Angeles. I almost said St. Louis. And then cover the Bills hiring their new head coach on Saturday, which did happen yesterday. And then, like 20 minutes ago, the Los Angeles Rams hired their new head coach, so maybe I'll post 2 videos on Saturday, or I'll cover that Sunday or whenever. Just as a little brief rundown. Now, you came here about the Broncos and their new head coach, whose name is Vance Joseph. Now, Vance Joseph spent this past year as the Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator under head coach Adam Gase, where they went to the playoffs and played in Pittsburgh as the 6th seed this past Sunday, but they lost. They lost. Unfortunately for Dolphins fans, they lost. But I'm not going to rub it in, Dolphins fans. This is not about your team, I'm sorry. But yes, Vance Joseph has been hired by the Denver Broncos as their head coach. And I remember a couple of years ago, yes, 2015, right before the Broncos hired Gary Kubiak to be their head coach back then, replacing the departed John Elway in a mutual parting between the Broncos and Fox. Sorry about that. And sorry about that. So after the mutual separation between the Broncos and John Fox, who is Gary Kubiak's predecessor, one of the candidates the Broncos were looking at was, at the time, Cincinnati defensive backs coach Vance Joseph. So, if you ask me if this was a huge surprise, I would say no. And then I remember that after Gary Kubiak had been hired to be the Broncos head coach, they were considering Vance Joseph as a defensive coordinator candidate. Now, since he was still under contract in Cincinnati, he didn't get a position with the Denver Broncos. Plus, the Cincinnati Bengals were denying the coach, well, one of their coaches, Vance Joseph, to interview because he was still under contract. But after his contract expired at the end of last season, Adam Gase handpicked him to be the defensive coordinator. So just as I said in the Gary Kubiak retires from coaching video I made on the 2nd, then, well, I said that I thought that the Broncos would hire Kyle Shanahan because of the familiarity. I can't say that word half the time. The familiarity. They were familiar. Oh, I'm sorry. I just can't say that word half the time. Familiarity. I sound stupid. But anyway, because they were familiar with Kyle Shanahan, and Kyle Shanahan did not coach with the Denver Broncos ever. But you may know the name Shanahan from his dad. His dad, Mike Shanahan, served as the Broncos head coach from 1995 through 2008. So because of the fact that John Elway hired Gary Kubiak, who was his backup quarterback, and then Elway's offensive coordinator under head coach Mike Shanahan for the last 4 seasons of John Elway's career after Gary Kubiak retired from playing, I thought that the Broncos were going to hire Kyle Shanahan. But the hiring of Vance Joseph does not surprise me a whole lot. But I thought the Broncos were going to hire Kyle Shanahan. And hey, not a whole lot of people are right in predicting who's going to end up where, because there's like 8 open slots and like 10 candidates annually. Well, some teams have more, some teams have less. I mean, you can just... you don't need to you don't need to nitpick at that, okay? But I have no idea who the defensive or offensive coordinator was going to be, or is going to be. I was thinking, oh yes, if Kyle Shanahan is hired, then I'm pretty sure he will retain defensive coordinator Wade Phillips, because Kyle Shanahan is an offensive mind. While I'm not so sure that Vance Joseph will retain Wade Phillips as defensive coordinator, seeing that Vance Joseph is a defensive-minded coach. But I would say that that would be a wise move to retain the veteran defensive coordinator. Now, also, because the defense is better than the offense, so I thought that the Broncos... I mean, hold on. Before I go any further, I will say no disrespect to the Broncos offense, but the Broncos defense is better. The Broncos defense has DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller, Aqib Talib, Bradley Roby, Brandon Marshall, and all of those defensive linemen. Derek Wolfe. Malik Jackson's not a Bronco anymore. But you get my point. They have Chris Harris Jr. too as another cornerback besides Aqib Talib. But you get my point. But the offense is not as good as the defense. The offense is good and it's great, but okay, okay, okay. The offense is good, but the defense is great. And I mean great. They have some real studs. Once again, no disrespect to the offense. They have some pretty good players. But I thought that the Broncos would hire an offensive-minded coach as well to kind of help out that offense. Plus, you know about that Broncos coaching, or not coaching, but quarterback, not controversy, but battle that will happen in the spring and the summer. Particularly in the summer. You know, June through August, between Trevor Siemian and Paxton Lynch. I think that they are two very good players. And you know, I'm just thinking that whomever that, you know, yes, I was saying it right. Whomever Vance Joseph picks to be his offensive coordinator, he has to choose one very wisely. Because that offensive coordinator has to decide who the quarterback of the future will be. And that will be a critical decision. I mean, that decision is just critical. You just have to start the best players that will give you the best opportunity to win. And, you know, you just don't want to start the quarterback that is worse. And I don't think a defensive-minded coach is... Yeah, well, some defensive-minded coaches don't know as much about quarterbacks as you think. I mean, I don't know how hands-on Vance Joseph will be on the offense, but once again, the offensive coordinator pick by Joseph will be crucial in helping to determine that. Because Joseph will not be able to determine that by himself. And if he can, then great, more power to him. Then he knows more offensive football than I think he does. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't know about offensive football. I'm just saying that an offensive mind knows more about offensive football than a defensive-minded person or coach or coordinator, whatever you want to say. Just a defensive mind. But nonetheless, which I personally liked this hire. I liked Doug Marrone being elevated from interim status in Jacksonville just a few days ago that I talked about yesterday. And I like this hire. So, good job, Broncos. You made a good hire. You hired a good person. I like. Hopefully, Joseph will keep that defense running on all cylinders, whether he retains Wade Phillips or not as defensive coordinator. But yes, guys, I do believe that that will do it for this football nerd video. And until the next football nerd video, I will see you all later. Goodbye, guys. Thank you all for watching. And as always, go Panthers. See you all later.